Hey guys, this is Nia. Welcome back to my channel. Today I will be teaching you guys how to paint tulips. I've made this tutorial and I've also made another video which I will upload separately as real-time paints with me of a bunch of tulips. So I will be uploading that maybe tomorrow if I finish editing the footage. Anyway, let's get started on this tutorial. First off, as usual, I'm just going to draw out the structure of the petals. This is quite simple and I'm just going to do it from the inside layer going to the outside. So first off, I just draw an oval and then I'm going to draw petals surrounding that oval. So 2 petals, one on each side, and last but not least another layer, but this time I'm going to do the iconic shape of the tulip. So this time I will be starting from the outside petal, which has sort of like a curvy backward S shape in the middle, so the bottom of the petal will show the layers behind it. The outer part of the petal is like an L shape with really smoothed out edge, and towards the bottom of the petal it comes together to a very fine tip from this angle. And then you are just going to repeat the same shape for the other side, but in a mirror reflection. If you find this a bit confusing, I suggest you start in the middle. Basically what you want to make is that round shape where the bottom of the petals meet. You can also make your petals closer together so it looks like it's at an earlier stage of growth, but as you paint, this variety will come naturally anyway, so as long as you understand the basic shape of the outside petals, it'll be okay. Basically, when you are able to create this drawing, everything else will be quite simple. So after you draw out the outside petal, which makes the iconic shape of the tulip itself, all you have to do is add some more features in the middle. So this time I'm just going to draw like a small curved mountain on top of each petal in the middle, and of course in mirror image. And then last but not least, I'm just going to connect the top by drawing out like an upside down U shape, and that's it. You basically only have 3 sections for the petals. I'm just going to quickly draw it out for you again for each section really quickly, and just going to speed through this. Okay, so now we can try to start drawing the leaves. The leaves are very simple and easy. It's basically the standard leaf shape, but very large in comparison to the flower. It's also quite long and grows out wrapping the stem. So basically you want to section out part of the leaf to look darker where it's wrapped around, and that's it. The main key is still the size in my opinion, so as long as you get the right size in comparison to the flower and it looks balanced, it should look great. And I'm just going to speed this up again to show you the comparison in size, and hopefully this makes sense. Now we are going to go on to the color swatches. For the flowers, I'm going to use the colors Permanent Orange, Quinacridone Rose, and Permanent Yellow Deep. And basically feel free to mix this around and get different colors. So as an example, if you want something looking more like an orangey red, then use more orange compared to the Quin Rose, and vice versa. I also like putting in some yellow for the flowers too, and I'm going to show you how I use my colors later on in this tutorial. And now we are going to swatch the colors for the leaves, which are Radiant Green, Yellow Green mixed with a little bit of Permanent Yellow Deep. I'm just going to show you how I mix the colors on my palette. I like mixing the greens together and then adding the yellow separately, and just adding it when I feel like changing the green to look a little bit warmer. Since the outer petals are the most important part in keeping the structure of the tulips, I'm going to draw it out first before painting it, and then you can fill it in with the color that you have. And then on the other side, I'm just going to do the same thing, but this time I'm not going to draw it out first, and I'm just going to freehand the same tulip petals. Notice that I'm using pressure on my brush when I'm covering the thicker area and then going down to the tip of my brush as the petal gets smaller while flicking it to the middle of the flower. I suggest using the pressure of the brush to get the shape of the petal, but if not, as long as the paint is still wet, it should still blend together nicely even if you do a lot of strokes to get it right. While the paint is still wet, now I'm just going to add a thicker consistency paint, and I'm also adding a bit more red into the mixture that we previously used for the petals, and I'm just going to dab it on the bottom of the petals to create a nice transition of colors. And because the surface is still wet, it should naturally travel across, or you could also use your brush to help the paint spread out to specific spots. Now I'm just going to fill the top with the same thick consistency paint. You want the petals to be quite dry at this point, or else, like the one on the right, the paint will also travel across to the wet surface. Using the same mixture, I'm just going to paint from the bottom of the middle part of the tulip, and I'm going to stop where the opening becomes more narrow, and at this point I'm going to clean my brush and dry the excess water so the brush is still damp but not dripping wet, and I'm going to paint the top part of it so it creates a nice tunnel for the paint to travel through, creating a nice gradation in the middle. You also don't want the middle to completely touch the outer petals. You can always risk your paint to travel through areas that you don't want, so just be very careful when you're doing this step. And that's it for the flowers, so take note that depending on the color of the outer petals, the rest of the color should be bumped up to look a little bit more red for this color combination. If your outer petal already looks too red, I just use the rose color by itself, so it still gives interest in the middle. The play on consistency is also key for this paint. As you can see, I just painted an additional petal. I think that this is a nice touch for some of your tulips, so not all of them look the exact same, so sometimes I just add one stroke or a couple to suggest a petal is sticking out. I'm just going to do the same thing again, but this time I'm going to let the outer petals dry a little bit more so you can see that in different stage of dryness the paint won't travel as fast. And if this happens to you, what you can do is clean your brush slightly and dry it so your brush is damp but not dry, because you still want a little bit of water to reactivate the paint. And you can pick the paint from the bottom of the petal and then spreading it across slightly, but make sure you still have the slight gradation on the petals. Now we're going to paint the stem, and this time I'm going to use a fairly thick consistency paint for the bottom, and while the petals are still damp, I'm going to let the green travel a little bit on the bottom so it has a really nice muted green, and then pulling it down to create the stem. This is much easier than what I usually do on my previous tutorials for flowers because the stem is quite thick on a tulip, so the brush control is much easier. And for the leaves, I'm playing with the pressure of my brush to create a leaf shape easily. I'm really pushing my brush down and dragging it quite a bit to make the leaf look really big and long, and then using a darker green by mixing in more viridian into your color mixture. Then I'm going to do the same thing again for the leaves, but with less pressure, and you can also start from either the top or the bottom of the leaves as long as you start at a point. So in the middle or the side of the leaf, it looks a bit darker to give the illusion that the leaves are curved in. Okay, so now we are ready to paint the tulips as a whole, and here I'm going to show you 3 different color variations by using the same color palette that we've been using this whole time, just by changing the ratio of each color. So I'm going to make 1 orange, 1 yellow, and 1 orangey red tulip. We are going to use the exact same techniques for this painting, so I'm not going to go over that again, but this time I want to talk about the color of the flowers that I'm going to be using, just to clarify how I combine my colors, because I think it plays quite an important role to make these flowers look more eye-catching. The first one I'm painting now is the exact same as the ones that we've practiced, which has the orange petals. So for this one, like the one before, we add more quin rose into the mixture that we use for the petals, and in a much thicker consistency for the bottom of the petals, the top, and for the middle. So essentially we have 2 color mixtures for each flower. Now I'm doing the yellow flower, so for this I use the permanent yellow deep for the petals, and then I'm just going to add in some orange for the bottom of the petals, the top of the flower, and the midsection of the flower in a thicker consistency. The reason why I'm painting the outer petals for all the flowers at this point is so I'm giving the outer petals some time for them to dry before we put more paint on top and on the middle to risk them from spreading everywhere. And last but not least, I'm using a bit of orange and the quin rose to create a reddish orange color. And as you can see, because the red already stands out, this time I'm going to pair this with the quin rose by itself, and you won't be able to see it as clearly when it's in a concentrated consistency, but the slight difference will show as you dilute the middle part of the flower to create the gradation in the middle. For the stem of the leaves, I also like to change the ratio of paint when I'm painting this area, so nothing looks too monotoned, and because we're using the exact same colors to create other shades of green, it will still look harmonious together, so also play around with the ratio of the colors here, but for this one you can experiment as you please here. Okay, so that's all I have to share with you for this tutorial. You can watch and paint along for this part of the video, and I'll see you towards the end. we're finally nearing the end. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is definitely my favorite flower to paint so far, and I liked it so much that I actually have an extra footage of me painting a whole page of this, which I actually planned on including in this tutorial, but it turned out to be very long already, so I'm just going to upload it separately maybe tomorrow if I can manage to finish editing. But if not, it'll come soon after this one either way, so hopefully you stick around to watch that one if you like this one. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed watching the process and learned something new from this video, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye!